I would like to, as we do every fortnight, start our meeting with a toast to Rotary International and to people of the world.
Rotary International,
Rotary
people of the world.
International, people of the world.
No, that's not you.
Thank you. And could I call on Louise Davis to toast our specific Rotary Club of the world tonight?
Absolutely.
Louise,
Thank you.
over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. I've got to unmute. Is it?
I've done it.
You've
You're
done it.
already unmuted, so we need perhaps your slide.
Screen?
Yes.
I got it. There we go. Have you got it?
Oh,
Okay. So tonight we will toast the Rotary Club of London, District 1130. And I thought I'd do a little slideshow and we'll go on to the next one. Oh, whoops. There we go. So basically I chose this club and it was my own thing to recognise the gallant fight that against COVID-19 by London, the city of the people of London. And also I chose it to give thanks to London, which is not only a place that I've loved for a long time, but it's also a city that played an integral part in my development of my own professional career in occupational therapy. I did training at the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, and in so doing, I fell in love with London and the people of London, and also London pubs as well. Yeah. And I love London so much. I actually considered to follow some of my friends after graduation and work as an OT over there, but life happened and I didn't, unfortunately. Importantly, I want to recognise that this is a historic club. It was founded in 1911, and that's why I picked the pictures of World War I, because this club actually was around before World War I, which is amazing to me. A lot of history. It was the first chartered club outside of North America. It holds weekly meetings on Mondays for lunch at the Chesterfield Hotel at Mayfair, which I looked at, and it's sort of, you can walk to Buckingham Palace. I hope I'm right in this because I was looking at maps. And currently, like us in this world of COVID, they're doing online meetings. It's a large club, 120 members, and they are proud of their international membership, from what I understand. And when researching this dynamic club, I was fascinated by their fundraising, including the lockdown appeal, which they actually raised. It's their own club's appeal, and they raised a generous sum of £12,500, which is a very, very generous sum of money. And they've got other charities that have donated to in this COVID-19 environment. So, ladies and gentlemen, Rotarians and friends, let's toast the Rotary Club of London.
Rotary Club of London.
Rotary Club of London. Thank you. And thank you, Louise. I'm going to hand over to Rowan Johnston, our president. And I know he typically welcomes all our guests and friends. So your microphone, Rowan.
Welcome, Gold Coast Rotary, active and honorary members, partners and guests to our 21st meeting for 2020, our 6th online. Welcome visiting Rotarians from the Rotary Club of London. We have Secretary and Vice President-elect Ian Balcombe and President-elect David Johnson. Welcome to our guest speaker. She hasn't returned yet. Hopefully she will soon. Chiaki Takenouchi, who's a Rotary Peace Fellow, who's speaking to us on responding to survivors of violence, and to Palm Beach Currumbin State High School student, Gabby Booth. And now I'll ask members to introduce their partners and or guests. Oh, sorry, another visiting Rotarian. A special friend of Gold Coast Rotary and MC for recent changeovers, past District Governor Ross Smith from the Rotary Club of Burleigh Heads. Welcome, Ross. I haven't forgotten any other Rotarians, but if I have, now's your chance. And I'll ask members to introduce their partners and or guests. Now, please, if you could raise your hand, I'll spot you, and then you can unmute your mic and let us know who you've got. It wasn't you, Nev. You were just adjusting your thing. Page 2. Nobody. Okay. Throughout the year. Oh, sorry.
I'd introduce my wife, but she's playing bridge online at the moment, so can't.
Okay.
I've been kicked into another room. So.
Okay, right. And Jeff Prentice. We've changed to the Jeff Prentice. So Mark Prentice is not with us. Jeff Prentice.
We can't hear you, Jeff. You need to unmute if you're going to speak.
She's not here at the moment.
Okay, and I see we've got the correct name in there. Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Okay, all right. So throughout the year, we recognise the anniversaries of the month that current active members were inducted and celebrate the number of years they have continuously achieved Rotary service above self. So we acknowledge the following members who joined in the month of June. 1 year ago, Tammy Mayfield, Karen Gaywall and Luciani Spurley. 21 years ago, Kate Camorley. And 36 years ago, Kevin Stapleton. Gold Coast Rotary's vision is that our members' actions today influence and engage the Gold Coast community of tomorrow, making a real difference to the lives we impact, both locally and in the world we connect with. Our members, as members, we use the Rotary four-way test of the things we think, we say, and we do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it bring goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Let this guide us this evening and in all our future gatherings, projects, and communications.
Thank you, Rowan. And would you like to invite the president from the Rotary Club of London just to say a few words?
What a good idea. So, President-elect David Johnson, welcome.
Thank you very much for the welcome and thank you for the invitation. I'm afraid I was caught out with the toast. It's a bit earlier in the day here and I should have had a cup of coffee, but it's never appropriate to toast with a cup of coffee.
What is the time, David?
It is currently 10:39.
And you don't have a wine in front of you? Obviously, you're not.
Well, we're lucky to be up at this time of day in UK. Now, I was particularly impressed by one of your members celebrating 36 years associated with the club, because that must have been a founder member of the original club of the Gold Coast before you recombined, and have the same number in your formation that we have in ours, which is 11. And we are certainly very proud of our history, and we try to actually build on it and use it to promote Rotary around the world, as well as in London. Because to me, history actually enables us to look back and take lessons from it before we jump forward. But we've never had a period as we have presently in London. We've been meeting by Zoom now for, Ian will correct me, I'm sure, but I think about this beginning of April, maybe it was the last week in March. So we've gradually improved our recording and our processing of the meetings, though they're chaotic because we have sometimes got 80 people on the screen. We're particularly pleased, though, with the response to our lockdown appeal. What we've asked people to do, we normally meet at the Chesterfield Hotel. Thank you for that picture. It brought it back to me, which is Edwardian in style and not inexpensive. And we asked people who would normally dine there to actually donate their dining fee, plus the money they'd normally put into the collection, plus the cost of travel. And many members have done that. And so, in a sense, it's been no sacrifice financially, but it has built, I think it's now approaching 14,000, a large opportunity to compensate for the fundraising we would otherwise be doing. And whether we'll be able to continue it forward, I don't know. Zoom might lose its attraction, but currently the opportunity to speak to you from the UK, and my opportunity I will have in my year to invite people from around the world to speak to us as a club, has opened new doors. But I certainly agree with those of your members who said we can't wait to meet physically, to be able to see and speak to each other in person again. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, David. Isn't it one of the things I love about the internet is that there simply are no borders. We are with each other all over the world at the same time, and that's enthralling. So for me, and I know for Rowan and all of our members, it's so exciting to have you with us. And Louise, thank you for organising that. Very special.
Yeah, and can I say that Louise has certainly lifted the bar on the international toast, not only toasting the club, but actually inviting members to join us. So whoever's next, that's the level.
The bar is officially raised, pretty sky high, but don't let that put anyone off. We can all keep playing. So we have another very exciting presenter tonight, who in fact is our National Youth Science Forum representative or attendee for 2021, I think. And she's going to be introduced tonight by Asad. So Asad, can you unmute yourself, please?
Thank you, Catherine. I just want to welcome Gabby Booth today and introduce her to our club. Gabby is a Year 11 student from the Palm Beach Currumbin State High School. She's seeking endorsement from our club for the next National Science Foundation Forum, which is in January 2021. I've actually glossed over her science reports, her Year 10 reports, which is on the other screen, and I can assure you that she's achieved excellence and shows leadership and great and is very promising. So quickly, I'd just like to introduce Gabby. If you can give us a quick introduction for yourself, we'll be excited to hear that.
Hi everyone, how you going?
Hello, Gabby. We're all muted, so if you don't hear from anyone, you'll know that's because we've all got our sound turned off.
Yep.
But that's so we can hear you really clearly. So over to you, and if you'd like to share your screen, whatever time you'd like to do that, that would be lovely.
Okay, I put together a little PowerPoint for me. So here we go. Is it up? Yeah. Sweet. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Gabby and I'm here to tell you who I am, why attending the National Youth Science Forum is so important to me and what I hope to get from it. Okay. I attend Palm Beach Currumbin State High School and am currently studying psychology, biology, mathematical methods, literature, legal studies and grade 12 music. I used to go to Kings of High School in northern New South Wales, but the academic opportunities lured me in. I even love my school so much that I actually spend an hour and a half of travel just to get to it. I live in Pottsville, by the way. I'm a school leader where I get to socialise with my peers and teachers and help improve the environment of the school. I'm a little bit of a nerd and I have a passion for science and music. I've been playing musical instruments for about 9 years now and am in 3 of the school bands for clarinet, alto, sax and trumpet. I've had the privilege of performing in lots of cool places such as Sydney Opera House, Disneyland, Universal Studios and the Brisbane Conservatorium, most of which I funded myself through busking. One of my highlights of the week is attending Science Club, where we get to perform dissections, experiments and have lessons during lunchtime. I think that science is extremely important and it's always fascinated me how it's the backbone of everything we do, from exercising to driving a car to even eating. Next. I first learned about what NYSF was last year at the World Science Festival in Brisbane. Ever since I spoke to an alumni, I've had the flag pinned up on my wall. Ready? Here it is. Determined to be a part of the program. It excites me that at NYSF I get to be surrounded by like-minded people who all have a passion for STEM. I have a family of 7, so ever since I was a little girl, I've always wanted to be a university student and live independently from my parents, where I get to surround myself with strangers and be exposed to new experiences. I feel that I could benefit greatly from attending this program, as I get to make lifelong friends, be exposed to a whole new range of scientific experiences, learn about potential careers, and also get a taste of what university is like. Next. Health science is an area of STEM that intrigues me a lot. It's such a broad topic with so many different career opportunities. I feel that if I attended NYSF, my eyes will be open to a whole new world of STEM, where it can inspire me of what I want to study and pursue. Current careers that interest me is being a speech pathologist, a midwife, a dermatologist, or an orthodontist. I have an autistic brother, and I've seen the positive impacts that health science has on people, as he couldn't actually speak properly until he was 5 years old. He went through therapy with a speech pathologist that helped him gain skills until he could actually speak. Helping people through science excites me, which is why I know that I want to work in the industry. With your help, your amazing Rotarians, I can experience this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of attending the NYSF, where I believe my life will change forever. Thank you.
Wow. I have to apologise, Gabby, because I didn't know you were seeking endorsement. On my run sheet, it says National Youth Science Forum to Gabby Booth. I assumed you were already endorsed and going.
Oh, no, not yet, not yet.
Let's not tell anyone, right? Just, I think you've got a pretty good chance. That was a very impressive presentation. And I love watching Call the Midwife. Anyone else? So, no.
Yeah. That's the only one we've got today.
Don't even know what it is. Okay. But that's very impressive. And for our visiting Rotarian friends, the photograph was in Canberra, taken in Canberra with a previous intake for the National Youth Science Forum. And that building that I cannot remember the name of is always just so iconic and representative of NYSF. Does anyone else know what it's called? Nope. Okay. Well, it's that round building in Canberra that hosts the National Youth Science Forum. Thank you, Gabby.
Thanks.
And do we have Chiaki with us at this point? Rowan? David? Can you see, do we have Chiaki? Yes. Well, I can see something coming up saying Takenouchi's iPhone. And that looks like a photograph and a smiling face. So, Chiaki, is that you?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can hear you. But you probably need to speak a little more loudly so that we can hear you very easily. And
let me see.
Chiaki, whereabouts are you from?
1 minute. Let me see if I can connect this. So then.
That sounds wonderful. Just need to see your face properly. It's such a business, isn't it? Chiaki, whereabouts are you from?
Hello?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can. And we just need to have you looking directly at your camera. That's it. Chiaki,
Yes, I know.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from Japan. But I grew up in the Netherlands half my life.
Wow.
So I'm sort of a mix between, let's say, European and Japanese.
Wonderful.
I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah.
So I'd like to just describe a little bit about you and your work, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Chiaki is a child protection and human rights professional in humanitarian and immigration context. She works to create an inclusive society where every child enjoys a healthy and peaceful life. She is also a legal anthropologist with a passion for putting the power of law into people's hands. She's conducted participatory research in the field of humanitarian assistance, the rule of law, and human rights. most recently, she worked at a local NGO in Lebanon, providing technical oversight and training on psychosocial support and case management in response to the needs of survivors among conflict-affected populations from Lebanon, Turkey, Syria, and Palestine. Wow. And of course, you will know that Chiaki is a Rotary Peace Fellow, studying with us here in Australia. And we've been looking forward to hearing what you had to share. So Chiaki, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. So I've actually had a little bit of a technical problem to join this meeting, and I'm sorry about that. So I actually had prepared PowerPoint slides, but I'm not sure if this will work out because...
It's okay, Chiaki. I've got it. I've loaded it into PowerPoint. I'll just have to share my screen. When you want the next slide to come over, just say next and I'll move on. How's
Sounds
that?
great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark.
I'll share now and see what happens.
Yeah, perfect. Great. But thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you guys all. And so while Mark is, preparing to share the slide, let me just say that I'll start with a little short personal background and explanation about Rotary Peace Fellow. And then today I wanted to share a little bit about, projects responding to survivors of violence based on my experience. But I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer that it's not a specialized training, which on any particular kind of intervention tool or approach, because that requires a lot more time. So today's session aims rather to introduce varying different kinds of responses to needs of survivors of violence and explain some key concepts and approaches and principles and highlight some points for considerations for funders of such interventions such as Rotary. So these are some key points that I hope to highlight today. But before I go into it, it's a really pleasure to share these experiences with you guys today. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope this is really helpful. And so I want to first start with explaining a little bit about who I am and where I come from, even though there was a little bit of brief interaction thanks to Catherine. Catherine, I don't know if I pronounce your name well. And so can you move on to the next slide? I was, as I said, born in Tokyo, Japan, but I grew up in Netherlands since I was 17. And I was interested in development and peace building since I was quite young, because my grandfather is from Hiroshima and he's a survivor from the nuclear bomb. So I personally feel the importance of establishing peace and preventing children from experiencing violence and war. And the picture on the left is from the first time I went to volunteer in Kenya when I was 18. And I saw that, all the children I met there in the slums I worked were really happy to just access education and simple things, even though they had nothing. And that really reminded me to, work hard. Like that is the reason why I work every day still, to fill the gap of social justice and inequality, because that really shocked me to see such a smile about simple things, basically. So since then, I studied and worked across the world, varying from Kosovo, Thailand, Japan, East Africa, and Lebanon. And now last year, I came to Australia to complete master's program in peace and conflict studies at University of Queensland as a Rotary Peace Fellow. So if you can move on to the next slide, I'd like to share a little bit about Rotary Peace Fellowship before I move on to today's topic. So Rotary Peace Fellowship is a fully funded scholarship targeting professionals working in the field of peace building, development, and humanitarian assistance, like myself. And, apparently there are around 50 fellowships that goes around across the world, but there are 10 fellows, including myself, that are cohort 2017 that is actually graduating this coming month, actually. We're about to finish. Enrolled in the master's program of peace and conflict studies at University of Queensland. And we come from different backgrounds, from Japan myself, Germany, US, Kenya, Peru, Mexico, Myanmar, and the Philippines, and also from different professional backgrounds. So the purpose of fellowship is not only for, professionals like ourselves to have an opportunity to gain more specialized skills in peace and conflict field, but also, provide an opportunity to learn from each other by sharing skills and knowledges and having conversations with each other. So it's a great opportunity. And if you'd like to know more about it, I've shared a link on the slide and also a focal point of contact for the fellowship here in Australia, if you're interested. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. This is a picture of 10 of us who are Rotary Peace Fellows, cohort 2017 at UQ. Hopefully we can all graduate together, even though it's such an uncertain time this coming month. So now, if you can move on to the next slide, I would like to move on to today's topic, which is about responding to survivors of violence. So there are many ways to respond to various different needs of survivors as listed. These are just the intervention examples that I could name, but I'm not going to describe the details of each intervention because I think they're quite self-explanatory. But I just wanted to mention that two key issues regarding these types of interventions. Firstly, ideally, more holistic, comprehensive services. So combination of all of these actions and interventions should be available by either one organization or a network of organizations coordinating together, so that survivors can select which ones meet their needs, but it should be more comprehensive and holistic. But nevertheless, some of these interventions, such as legal assistance or mental health services or safe first, they require specialized and trained staff, which is not always possible because of lack of resources. And also, when responding to survivors, you cannot just provide one-off service, and ensuring sustainability and long-term interventions for these actions are always a bit of a challenge. And second issue I wanted to mention quickly is that although some of these interventions respond really to immediate needs of survivors, so like mental health services or healthcare services or legal assistance or cash assistance or case management, they respond to immediate needs, and of course they're vital. But there are other interventions that respond to longer term needs that actually have healing effect for survivors, such as access to education and employment opportunities. So I will tell you more about art therapy workshops shortly, but many of the survivors in this kind of workshop often sought support to access employment as well, even though they're not always accessible, because they promote independence from perpetrator and sense of self-worth and productivity that also continue to improving their resilience and psychosocial well-being. So some of these interventions are often undermined in the scheme of responding to survivors, but are as important. So having said this, today I want to focus on a little bit more on mental health and psychosocial support aspect of responding to survivors, particularly. So if you can move on to the next slide. What do I mean by mental health and psychosocial support? It's a type of, I included the definitions that are related to this, but I'm not going to details except to explain that it basically includes any type of local or outside support that aims to protect or promote psychosocial well-being, including interventions from specialized healthcare service providers such as therapists or psychologists, but also non-health sectors. So it covers both psychological and social aspects of an individual. So besides specialized mental health services, psychosocial support services also include activities that try to improve relationships and also tools that support holistic well-being and mobilize resilience. So some of the best psychosocial support actually come from friends or families of communities that the survivors live in. And it's important to pay more attention to these other supporting factors when responding to survivors. So if you can move on to next slide. That's another set of definitions that could be helpful. But you can read through it, so maybe you can move on to another one. So this is a pyramid that is often used in the field of mental health and psychosocial support sector responding to survivors to determine what kind of interventions you want to support according to which level of this pyramid that you want to target, basically. So the first level at the bottom, the blue one, concerns provision of basic needs in a way that is participatory, safe, and accessible to make sure that all people are protected and all people have well-being. So it's more generalized, broader approach. So this includes, for example, advocacy for more inclusive service provision, community level awareness, raising awareness on where to access services, or coordination between service providers. So that's on general level. And then the second level, the pink one, targets people who are able to maintain their mental health and psychological well-being if they receive help in assisting community and family support. So it's a little bit more targeted. And these activities can include, for example, community-based awareness groups, peer-to-peer support sessions, so like on providing parenting skills sessions, life skills sessions, safe space, like expanding safe space for children or child-friendly environments. So these are activities that take place on the second level that are targeting different communities. And this level focuses on increasing resilience of both individuals and families and communities, and enhancing already available protective factors and support network. And then the third level, the green level, is a little bit like a bit more focused. So it's focused intervention by trained and supervised support workers. So that includes like psychosocial first aid, outreach, non-specialized case management, and referral to psychosocial support sessions. So this is more about responding to specific needs of an individual survivor, but not the specialized service. And then the last fourth level is a specialized service. So that targets, people who are suffering, for people whose suffering is intolerable, or for people who have difficulties in basic daily functions beyond the scope of like general services. So this should be provided by trained, skilled technical people who provide case management, counseling, therapy, clinical management of rape, and referral to healthcare services. So these are kind of different levels of interventions that you can kind of look into and decide where you think your project might target appropriately, depending on the resources, depending on what kind of organization you can possibly work with. All of that can be considered. And so you can move on to the next level. But just quickly, I wanted to mention also, although this pyramid is about mental health, it can be also applicable to other services provided for survivors, such as legal aid and case management. It's kind of a general rule, let's say. So next slide, please. So based on best practices, child protection agencies specifically nowadays follow this model called socio-ecological model to promote more holistic responses and prevention of future harm. So this model is developed based on child developmental psychology and sociology, but can also be applied to concerns regarding adult survivors of violence, I think, personally. And the main idea is to understand and recognize that individual experiences, like each individual person experiences interrelated, mutual, influential relationship with her or his physical and social environment, and in different ways. And then how one individual response to violence or traumatic events must be understood within this context where they interact with their environment. So based on this model, interventions work on both intrapersonal, so individual psychological issues, but also on environmental factors to strengthen abilities, skills, and change attitudes on a wider level. So the expected outcomes of such interventions for survivors of violence are not only to respond to individual needs, but also to restore and strengthen family and community support systems on a wider level, and promote well-being of an individual as well as family, so that the risk of potential harm are reduced. And then also improve environments that individual can not only survive, but also become a productive member of the society again. So following this model, there are two key approaches that I personally think any interventions responding to survivors should consider at the time of program planning. So if you can move on to the next slide. So the first thing that I think you should generally consider is how to identify coping mechanisms and protective factors. So coping means, for a person to be able to manage, adjust, and live with, you adapt different mechanisms to deal with the experience of violence and trauma, basically. And protective factors are factors that help offset negative effects of exposure to risks, and that increase well-being. And that can be really anything, and that can have positive or negative impacts. So there are terms like negative coping mechanisms and positive coping mechanisms. But I just wanted to say that it's important to recognize that, as I said, individuals respond differently and develop different coping styles and coping mechanisms, even to the same kind of violence, to deal with the trauma of experiencing that violence. So, and also contextual factors affect the kind of protective factors that are available to individuals. So like some people talk to others in their family or community or ask for help openly, while others think privately until they come to a resolution inside themselves. Or some turn to activities like play or divert to their thoughts, or like more outgoing activities, while others try to forget, or some try to find meanings, or be involved in more productive activities, or maybe find resolution through prayers, while others might think it over and over within themselves and try to find an answer. So it really depends on how people cope with violence. And not everyone who experiences a traumatic event has symptoms of like psychological distress. So it's also important to recognize that there's no symptoms doesn't mean that they're affected by violence. And then lastly, for frontline workers responding to survivors of violence, it's really important to explicitly recognize that there's no right or wrong way to cope with violence, and that what happened was not their fault. That's really important. And if you can move on to the next slide. The second issue that we should always keep in mind and try to understand is how we can strengthen the existing resilience and support systems within the family, within a person, and within the community. So this approach may have less obvious and measurable impact because it's more about resilience, which is ability of individuals to, or families or community to cope with. So develop more positive coping mechanisms so that the chain of harm and violence is broken. It's less obvious, so you can't really measure it, but at the same time, it has more long-term and sustainable impact. So it's really important to look into this in programs responding to survivors. And if you can move on to the next point. I want to give an example of such an intervention briefly. So back in Lebanon, in my old organization, we had an art therapy and psychosocial support project on a community-based level, so on the third level of the pyramid. It's not a specialized counseling per se, because it's a group-based peer-to-peer psychosocial support session, but it's facilitated by our therapist. So it's a bit of an in-between, but the third and fourth level of the pyramid, actually. And this project in particular in Lebanon was focusing on responding to the specific needs of survivors of SGBV, so sexual and gender-based violence in Palestinian and Syrian refugee camps. And it was a combination of, you know, learning about how to conduct expressive art techniques and also going through the processes of peer-to-peer support sessions at the same time. So they start by playing with clay individually, and like learning about color, how to express themselves by using clay and color. And then they slowly develop the process by learning about how to paint by copying different existing paintings. And then finally they end by, well, if they want to, by drawing self-portrait. So these are pictures from different participants in the sessions, and they're copying existing paintings. So it's not really self-portrait, but it's still very expressive of the emotional processes that each woman are going through. And I just wanted to share this example with you because I think it's a very powerful intervention that have quite, how can I say, explicit outcomes. So the key impacts of the project that we found through participatory research on this project was that the act of art making and the processes that they go through provide women and girl survivors to, one, firstly have an image or have an entry point to reflect on the past and look towards the future in a safe space that is established through the process. And secondly, to build a sense of self-esteem and empowerment by being by just directly being involved with something productive with their hands, and therefore develop resilience. And thirdly, to express and regulate emotions, so to give psychological relief by really using artwork to express what's inside themselves individually. And then fourthly, to recreate the sense of community and personal identity by reflecting on what had been expressed in the artwork and talking about it together in the peer-to-peer sessions. They can not only process the past experiences of trauma and emotions attached with it, but also sometimes transfer and transform the emotions to something a little bit more positive through the processes. But again, it's a very powerful intervention, but it does require a trained counselor with artistic skills to make sure that the space that they conduct such processes is a safe space, and that the facilitator of the session can respond to different psychosocial needs. As you know, this process can be very emotional and trigger different emotional responses. So the person who's facilitating the session needs to be able to respond at that moment. So such project can be quite costly, and sustainability again can be quite challenging in a way. Now, if you can move on to the next slide, I want to quickly discuss a few principles for donors like yourselves or funders or people involved in such projects should consider when developing a project responding to survivors. So first, key principle that we need to consider always is non-discrimination and meaningful access to services. So we need to consider what kind of barriers to access services may exist due to logistical, economic, social, cultural reasons, or insecurity or lack of information available, all these factors need to be considered to improve access to services for especially most vulnerable and marginalized individuals. And consider what kind of specific factors that particularly marginalized group might face as a barrier to access services. That's really important. And then secondly, you need to prioritize safety and dignity first and foremost. So concern, like, for example, safety of survivors is of course important. And in order for field workers implementing such interventions to be able to identify risk factors, training such as psychosocial first aid and safe identification and referrals are very essential, because these trainings equip the field workers with basic skills and essential skills to identify not only survivors of violence in a safe manner, but also detect signs of potential risks of harm and violence and ensure safety in that moment when they receive cases. So learning about how to listen, learning about how to respond in that moment is really important. But besides that, generally, when you are planning a project, you also need to consider how you can enjoy the safety of your own staff as well, because responding to violence can be very sensitive and tricky. So yeah, physical factors of the office, for example, or how the staff might respond to a case when they receive a sensitive case, these things need to be considered carefully. And that relates to also the third principle, which is do no harm, because being safe is not enough if people do not have their dignity. So people need to feel valued and also to have a sense of self-respect, even if they are survivors or victims of violence, of course. And also prioritizing the safety and dignity of survivors means that you always have to consider whether the intervention may have negative impacts, sometimes. So it requires careful considerations of potential risks of secondary victimization or further harm when you're responding as well, and what kind of impact your intervention might have for survivors physically, emotionally, psychologically, socially, and maybe even economically. And it also is crucial in this regard to understand socioeconomic, emotional, and mental health needs of perpetrators when you are deciding on appropriate response as well, to prevent any future harm from happening. And to do so, as a fourth principle, participation and consultation is very, very important. So where possible, safe participation and consultation with all actors involved, including survivors, should take place when you're planning the project. And I mean, I think you're doing well in this regard, because I heard that you already had a session with Salvation Army, and getting in touch with key actors and service providers in your area is a great first step to do this. Because, reaching out to survivors is not always an option. And lastly, all of these principles mean that any intervention responding to survivors of violence require survivor-centered approach, which put the affected individuals at the center of the decision-making about anything, basically. But this approach also requires a complex act of balancing between respecting the views of survivors about their own protection and well-being, so what they really want and what they are seeking, and taking necessary measures to intervene in urgent cases, because there are reporting obligations for certain cases that involve risks of self-harm or risk of harming others. So that balancing the act can be very difficult sometimes. If you can move on to the next slide. Hello? Hello.
It doesn't want to move on.
Oh,
It's okay. I can just continue as well if that's
probably
issue.
a couple more minutes. Chiaki.
Yeah. It's
And that's
I'm
about-
almost done. So just a little bit of key issues actually to highlight before I end. And this may not be directly related to you as a Rotary Club, but I just wanted to quickly mention that like I say, survivor-centered approach requires that, especially in a context where needs and demands exceed resources, sometimes you're required to do a difficult job of prioritization and professionalism. So it really is also important for anybody who's involved in this kind of work to understand and accept that it's okay that you can't help everyone, because you're doing what your part and what you can do in your best, and draw lines between professional, compassionate attitude and compassionate responses and personal involvement and investment. So sometimes back in my work in Lebanon, I had to tell my field staff, for example, to stop taking money from their pocket to meet their basic needs of survivors that come to our office. And as much as we want to help, creating dependency doesn't in the end help survivors. And sometimes we need to be harsh to do the right thing. So working in such environment and confronting that harsh reality can be very difficult for field workers. And so if you can move on to the next slide, this is why I want to end my talk by stressing the importance of self-care and adequate staff care support for field workers. So in my old organization, which was a local small NGO in Lebanon, led by Syrian and Palestinian refugees, one of the biggest challenges was to ensure the well-being of the staff, because we live in such severe, harsh environment, and everybody was underpaid, and there was no adequate staff care available, even regardless of the fact that we were working in such hard conditions. So I know that in general, investing in human resources or like indirect costs are considered not so good in the nonprofit sector. And, you know, I understand from the perspective of donors or people who want to donate to charities, you want to see the direct and immediate impact that can be measured by numbers, right? And that's totally normal. And also direct funding to increase numbers of services is as important. But I just wanted to stress at the end that allocating more resources for training, staff care, and self-care for field workers actually directly contribute to improving the quality and impact of services that are provided, because they ensure that the field workers are well equipped with essential skills and knowledge about the principles that I had discussed, and also have stable psychological well-being themselves so that they can care for others. So I hope that you consider these important points when you're deciding on what kind of projects and activities that you want to get involved in. And I included here some resources that you can look up again. And if you're interested in the art therapy project that I mentioned, I can also share with you the research report that we had published based on our participatory action research. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope it wasn't too conceptual or theoretical. And let me know if you have any questions.
Oh, gosh, Chiaki. I would imagine we've got several hundred questions. And the problem is, you know, we could ask you questions and have you talk with us all night. And I think, unfortunately, we are going to run out of time. So,
I'm sorry I talked for too long.
I shared beautiful information. And I think the big thing that you finished with, that I took away, is that the more we help the caregivers, the workers, the more leverage that gives them to help others.
Definitely.
The more well-being we're supporting, the more well-being they can provide to the people who need the help. And your last
That's it.
slide, second last slide, where you said you can't help everyone, we have to draw the lines and the boundaries. Not that any of us ever wants to do that. And there has to be a division of labour. So thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us tonight. And I think the other thing it's done for me, and perhaps everyone could share their agreement or not, but share your agreement if you will, that the work that we do for Rotary International, the Rotary Foundation, to provide for Rotary Peace Scholars is very well received. So if you agree with me in that, would you please unmute yourself and show your appreciation to Chiaki in our normal Rotary way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a delight. And your work, I could listen to it forever. I'm sure we're all the same. Thank you. So, unmute. Yes, I'd like me to unmute. Thank you. So time for a couple of directors' reports, or at least one anyway. David Bagley, do you have a report for us about the Bazaar main event?
Quick report. The bazaar is definitely going on the 4th of October at the moment, so we're being very optimistic that all relaxations will drop off by then. We've just putting plans in place for a couple of contingencies, but yeah, generally we're going out to the exhibitors to start signing them up from next week, and we'll probably put tickets on sale at 1st of July. So there might be a few people tapping others on the shoulders for a bit of help, especially in the promotions and social media areas somewhere. And but we've got a committee moving along. Most of our keynote speakers that we had signed up for August are available in October, so that's great, on the 4th of October. And if you want to hear Sophie Thompson, who's one of our keynote speakers from Gardening Australia on TV, she's actually doing a virtual gardening session with Kate and I on next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. So follow the link there on Facebook and listen to have a little talk about safe. And she's talking for Assad's benefit on gardening for health and well-being. So that follows on a little bit from what we're talking about tonight. So, yep, Bazaar's on its way.
Fantastic. And is Tammy with us? Do we have Tammy with us tonight?
Tammy, apologies, she had an emergency, so...
Okay, so John Davis, do you want to give us just a minute on an international report?
I'll be very brief, but thank you, Catherine. Yeah, no, I'm very excited to say that between Louise and myself, we've done, well, Louise has done the research. We've done the interviews with certain community charities on the Gold Coast. And I'm pleased to advise that my recommendation through Kathy to the board is that we support Rise Up, which is a domestic violence organisation on the Gold Coast that assists, well, it's more than the Gold Coast, but what we're planning to support is just Gold Coast at this stage, where they work with DV Connect and bring families together and outfit houses for these families to basically move in, and they've got their bread and butter and everything ready to kick off. So very excited about that. And secondly, in the homelessness front is supporting Rosies, which is a very long-term Gold Coast organisation. I believe we've been a part of them in the past, but we're re-energising that. And yeah, so with both of those, I've put an application into our district to get some funding, which hopefully that will assist them and allow extended funding for some projects later in the year as well. So that's an update.
Fantastic, thank you. There's probably a lot of us who've worked on the streets with Rosies over the years. 1987, they started at Schoolies with some trainee priests from Melbourne. And yeah, pretty amazing organisation. So it makes me feel very happy. So now, Rowan.
Yes, Catherine.
President Rowan, would you please close the meeting or take over whatever you would like? And I leave this in your hands, leave the close in your hands.
Thank you. Tonight, 24 members and 7 guests were part of this online Rotary experience. Thank you, Chiaki, Takenouchi and Gabby Booth, for sharing your experience with us. To Mark Urquhart and the program, the club admin team, Chair Catherine Palin-Brinkworth, and our men behind the scenes, David Bagley and David Gillen. Thank you for helping us deliver this online experience. Thank you all those that spoke, program chairs and program and project leaders. The Louise, outstanding effort to get our visitors from the Rotary Club of London. Thank you so much, David and Ian, and for being the club that we toasted, and you were here to hear the toast, so that's pretty special. Good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and for the impact that we have on the lives that who we connect with. I hope you all enjoyed this Rotary experience and believe it is a good investment of your time. Our next gathering and last for the Rotary year is on June 18, my last meeting as President. I will hand over to President Melissa for the 2021 Rotary year for the first meeting on July 2. Change over. Sorry?
Sorry, before you hang up, if I can have a quick word.
Yeah, certainly, mate. The changeover dinner will be in August, date to be confirmed, once we know when the Southport Golf Club can accommodate us. Last year we had 73 in attendance, and this year we have 20 new members plus partners to fill the room. So we want to make sure we can have 100 in the room. This will be a great occasion to celebrate in style the club and members that we love, to acknowledge the achievements of the year we have just experienced, and hear what is planned for the year ahead. This soon will remain open until 8:45 for those who want to enjoy some fellowship, and I look forward to catching up again with you real soon. And over to you, Shoei.
Thank you, President Rowan. Look, a bit of a sad news. Most of you probably saw it on the club's Facebook, but our past member, past Rotarian John Bird, passed away last Sunday. Oh. And his family is having a gathering at 11 o'clock on Sunday on the beach to disperse his ashes in the ocean, where his son, who passed away a few years back, so anyone who wished to attend, the invitation was open through Facebook from family to all friends and Rotarians and associates. So if you have a chance to look at it on Facebook, and if not, it is 11 o'clock just outside Northcliffe Surf Club. Thank you.
Thanks, Shoei. Anyone else? Just wave at me if you want to say anything. Yes, Sue Foskett. I can see you, Sue.
Where is she? Oh, yeah. Unmute.
That's the trap.
Gotcha.
I should have mentioned at the right opportunity, but I'm concerned about the blue card and how we actually get people to commit. John, thank you for your message. It's all duly noted. I think you have to address it at the beginning of the meeting, and I thought I sent an email to David today saying we're all getting ready for our dues coming through and have to be paid. I think at this time we should make sure everybody's got one.
Good job.
That's my Pennyworth as an outgoing woman.
Good job.
Well, Sue, just from my experience, it was a very simple online application because it's charity. It cost nothing, and it was I had it within 2 weeks, so it's not hard.
Look, most of us have it already. We just have to renew it if
Well, they're all starting to come in now. I've got to renew mine. We get a reminder, but it's just getting them to start because so many of these new members haven't got one.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe, Sue, if you could, I'm so sorry. If you could perhaps get a note to Mark and we can put it in the agenda for the next meeting and cover it off really early, or even get a note out with the agenda. That would be great.
Okay, no problems.
Yeah, because changing the agenda on the day kind of gets a bit, ooh. Doesn't it, Mark?
Sue, it's Rowan. Can you give me the list of those that haven't got it, and I'll chase them up.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to say thank you, everybody, and leave you to party on. I always I get so much energy out of having you all seeing all your faces on the screen. But I'm going to leave you in Rowan and Mark's capable hands and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
Pleasure.
Rotary and peace the world over.
Thanks all.
Okay, let's do that.
Yes.
Thanks to you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.